Is there anything more that people would like to know about Margaret? Okay. Yes.
I guess I want to know, like, how much does Margaret's husband know about all of this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
She seems very secretive. So, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good. Yes, hello?
I loved it, Jen, and I love you. I wanted to hear a little more about Margaret's work and her falsifying her results, and I also wanted to know a little bit more about Kara's mother, because she was the impetus for what Kara did, and I wanted to see her work, get to know her work.
Okay. Good to know. Yes.
And along those lines, maybe a little more details on how it all went down, like, you know, when they were trying to stop her and the mother dealing with that and knowing that, you know, she was in danger, maybe stuff like that, to kind of raise those stakes.
Okay, very good.
I think I also want to know, does she ever get caught after, you know, what happens with the case?
You wonder who the man is at the end.
Yeah. When an investigation starts, you know, so what happens?
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't know if Kara's mom saying, "You won't see me in the morning," that line, I don't remember the exact line, but I don't know if that was an implication that she knew that something was going on with her life, or that she was, you know, being targeted. So I don't know if there was any real intention with that line.
I've read it a couple of times, so I was always curious of this. But you've got a protagonist and an antagonist, and then one of the questions I have, I think I may have told some of my colleagues about it, is there any development on the redeeming side, or is there any redemptive side to the antagonist in the story, and is there any significant negative side to the protagonist in the story? And I'm not using names intentionally, because I leave it to the audience. Do the audience have a point of view of, like, who is a traditional protagonist and who is a traditional antagonist, and any thoughts about that interplay?
I have a thought that's not necessarily answering the question, but I thought, like, a scene that was really interesting to me was, I think it was like I forgot the name of the character, but it was like under the water and kind of like
Margaret?
same, but there was a question where it was kind of like, let's ask the monkeys what they think. And I thought it was like a really interesting perspective, because everything about this is about the monkeys' experiments, but because they don't get to talk, we don't really get to hear the perspective. And that was like a scene where I was kind of like, I wish I could visually see how they're kind of reacting and like responding to that. And I guess that was like a response to the question, because it's not like a protagonist antagonist, but it's kind of like, you know, in a way they're like victims of the story, but is there a way in which you can tell a story in which they also get to tell their own story? Or, you know, when they end up at the sanctuary at the very end, how are they happier? Like, what's like their ending, I guess, was another stream of thought that I had.
It sounds like you like a little more of the monkey POV, since their monkeys are so vital to what's going on here. Okay, that's very interesting. Yes.
I found myself wondering about Doctor's relationship with her son. She like invokes motherhood, and also talks about her son, like uses him as a reason to like have her stop the torture. But maybe if we saw a scene, maybe even a phone call with her son, it might be interesting to see whether or not their relationship is strained due to her work as well.
Okay. Yes.
I going back to Margaret, would maybe like to see a little more flushed out, kind of her thinking and her psychology, because she does these horrific things that most people would think they're absolutely horrific, but somehow she has rationalized them in her mind, and she says, you know, I'm a cog in the wheel, and, you know, I'm not, you know, really the culprit, and I mean, she isn't, but just more of how she can rationalize as an intelligent, educated scientist, like doing this, even though we know it does happen in real life. Just psychologically, like how she can rationalize what she's doing. Especially when she knows that actually it's not even true science, that it's, they would get the results and then she's doing the experiments to get results.
And also, since she's being confronted with the possibility of losing her life too,
Mhm.
like how does she argue her way out of that?
Mhm.
Yes.
To your question, Hayden, in my view, I've had a lot of sympathy for Kara until she commits murder. Then I kind of pulled back and thought, well, she's not different. She's the same. So, if that's your intention, that's what I pulled from it, is that in the end, she was just as bad.
I mean, the punishment is very extreme, because she becomes almost as bad as the person who is doing these things to animals. So there's a terrible thing that's happening within inside herself, that she would end up doing something like that. I think the fact that the scientist was falsifying the studies becomes an important part, because it's like the animals are losing their life for nothing, basically. I mean, not even to help humanity. There's nothing redeeming really about what the scientist is doing, but still to have a person become like that is a terrible thing.
Yes.
I was wondering two things. One is what is that experiment for? I don't think scientists enjoying torturing animals. It was, and then maybe I missed what is that for, or that I didn't get it. So then, it's a scientist side has a reason. It was, it's to do this for this, and then it's not like some mentally problem person enjoying torturing or not like this. And same things with
Kara?
Yeah. What made her choose that extreme way to do this? Because as a journalist, and she tried, and that also maybe I missed, or she tried, and as a journalist way it didn't work out, or those kind of things, and then I don't know what made her tip off because at first impression of this and some other serial killer things, and was standing with somebody in your ear, and then that was a scary part, but it's not about this mentally troubled person enjoying torturing others. That if that way, it is that way too. But I wasn't sure what to.
It sounds a bit like you wanted to understand more why Margaret was doing these, was performing these experiments in this way to the monkeys. What was the benefit of that, if any? And also, it sounds like you want to know more why did Kara why did she end up taking these last extreme steps? Were there other steps along the way that she tried that failed, and then so this was her only choice? So it sounds like you've got more why questions, like why.
Right, those between, I didn't get it. So it's like all of a sudden it's jumped to this extreme.
Okay.
But there's some philosophical questions there, like not necessarily answering what this author was trying to say, but like if you think about scientific research on animals, in theory, there is a scientific goal. In theory, there's a reason for this, but that you have to juxtapose the actions that are being taken, and you ask your question: how damaged is the person doing this? Like that, is there damage there? Is there something going on there? Like those are things to explore, and then for a protagonist that would respond, going back to your question, a protagonist that would respond in a manner, or a person that would respond in a manner of that kind of torture to the scientist, when does person's experiences in life break them? When do they find a way that they have to react accordingly in those issues?
Yes.
And for me, I'm not a person that, and this might not agree with American audiences, but I thought that for me the ending was emotionally satisfying because she didn't let Dr. Murray get away with it. But at the same point, because before that, when there's a scene between Kara and her mother, they're talking about accountability.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that someone's following her at the end, that at least now gives, well, maybe there's going to be accountability for her too. So that's why, for those who, have a moral problem with someone getting away with murder, that you leave that kind of out there that, well, maybe she's not going to get away with it.
Okay. Very good.
Just adding on to what this woman was just saying about the big jump, I would like to have seen, felt a little more build up to Kara's outrage, why this was stirring inside of her, right? I feel like it's something that had layers and layers, and she just got to the point that she couldn't take it anymore. She snapped, but it was kind of fast in terms of how she got there. So a little more build up, I think.
So I don't know, this is going more towards like real life implications, but I'm a social worker and I actively work with people who take antipsychotics and need antipsychotics. So I thought the choice of drug that was being considered the experiment for the purpose of the experiment was interesting. And I guess I'm also trying to reconcile how we got to the antipsychotics that why'd you use, and if we take out the falsifying piece, if these experiments were for some sort of quantifiable purpose that could lead to the betterment and the abatement of symptoms that I see in my clients every single day, what is the balance against the experimentation that had to get to that point? And I don't necessarily have a clear answer, but I just was curious about what are we doing this as ethically as possible? What does that even look like? Is it possible to do this in any sort of ethical way? I don't know, but I have the other side of piece of seeing what medications can do for the people I work for, and balancing that with the horrific pieces of what might have had to happen to get to that place. And some of the antipsychotics I know of are they have different generations of them. Some of them are still the older school ones have horrific symptoms and side effects, and I see that in my clients who had to take them for years on end, versus the newer ones, which are being developed presumably through some of these methods, I don't know, but could be helpful in terms of people who need to be on these medications for most of their lives to be able to have some sort of healthy, somewhat of a recovered life, to be able to achieve goals and such. So I don't know, I think it's a really interesting idea. And I also work with people who have a history of violence, and I think there's also this interesting idea of what leads people to violence. There are assessments to try to test what is the likelihood of somebody going into violence, but it's a very hard thing to predict, and I think that makes it very interesting when it happens.
Hi. Sort of bouncing off of what you said, I think I would want to see more of the obsessive nature in Kara when it comes to investigating this company, and it would be interesting to show it in ways in which we raise the stakes for her. What if she's spending all day and all night just focusing on this and not showing up to class? What if she's being suspended or something, or what if she confronts Margaret head on, and it's this is the only thing that's left of her that will help her keep moving forward, and if she doesn't achieve it, then it would probably allude that she had failed her mother or something. So I think that would be interesting and would further justify her approach to Margaret in the end. That's my take.
Any other hands? that's very helpful to drive the conversation. But if not, then I think that's it for the feedback. If people have any like, specific questions about the source of the research and stuff like that still.
Yeah, I was just wondering when those took place, from the video.
So I can answer it.
Yes.
Yeah, so all of the videos are publicly existing, it's all real. It's all real footage. And the scroll at the end that you saw started in the 80s, sorry, not the 80s, what am I saying? Started in the 90s and ends with 2023, so it's very current. Yeah, there are currently 14 NIH funded non-human, they're called non-human, primate experimentation centers. And I am not a scientist, but some of the research seems very, very dicey to me. I don't know that I find it difficult to believe. I read a lot of NIH reports, like putting this together, and I find some of it really hard to understand how it's of utility. But no, the last one was from 2023. It goes in order from the 90s to now.
Just two things. I want to know, first of all, I guess is Dr. I don't know if it's Elizabeth Murray. She's still practicing, I guess, right? Or she still is.
Elizabeth Murray's research is a little bit different from what I took. Obviously this is a work of fiction. This isn't a real person. Elizabeth Murray does fear and deprivation experiments. So she traumatizes the animals and puts them in conditions where they feel extreme fear, and then she dissects the brain to see what portions of the brain are triggered by that. That kind of research has been going on for many, many years, and the results don't, as far as I know, and anybody please feel free to correct me, they don't change. The same portions of our brains are triggered by trauma. But to your point, talking about the ethics, I think it's a very, very interesting question, because if we're looking at other species and we're saying, okay, we're going to use these species to try to figure out how we are traumatized as human beings, there's sort of there's multiple questions, but when we're talking about ethics of that philosophically, a lot of times the way people justify violence or abuse or whatever of non-human animals is to say that they are not like us, they're not sentient, they do not feel the same emotions. If that's true, then how can the cognitive results of what you're doing be accurate? How can those cognitive results be the same as us? Because if if they feel completely cognitively differently, if it's a completely different neural function, then how can we use that to fix our own trauma? If they feel the same as us, well then, the moral, would we take so then are we talking about intelligence? Would we take a mentally disabled person? Can we do experiments on them? If I can find somebody that's brain damaged more so, like for example, a pig has roughly the intelligence of a human 3-year-old. So if I can find a brain damaged person who is less intelligent than a non-brain damaged human 3-year-old, can I do experiments on them? Where is the line?
There was I think it was, I don't know if it was like 5 years ago or something, but I know there was a push where there was a case where they were trying to assign not personhood, but they were trying to give more rights to, I don't know if it's a specific primate or just like change a law that to give more, I guess, credence to their propensity to be sentient.
I know it's in
But it was some kind of legal case, and then it was
The non-human rights project was arguing. It took their case actually up to the Court of Appeals in the state of New York, arguing for personhood for chimpanzees,
personhood,
and the court ruled against the non-human rights, against the animals. I just want to point out one thing, and that is I think there's a perception among the public that animal testing is necessary and helpful, and that perception has been spread by a very, very lucrative animal testing industry. But in 2023, the Congress passed the FDA Modernization Act, which eliminates the requirement of drug companies to experiment with animals. And in fact, there are many groups that are working on in vitro tests, like in test tubes, like tissues, on chips, and computer modeling, and experiments in humans. That with microdosing, so there are many ways to do this research without harming animals. And I think in the future there won't be any animal tests at all, but it's still very much a reality because it's a big business, not because it's necessarily good for science.
Yeah, that was something when I was researching it. Now I can't remember the statistics, probably because I've just drinking too much wine. But it was something really shocking to me because they were saying something like, I forget, like 98% or something of animal test results
They're not applicable.
don't translate exactly to human subjects, because even when you think about like chimpanzees are probably the closest to us, right? So they're like high 90s percentage of our DNA, but still very, very, very different. Like that little 3 or 4%. There's a big difference between you and a chimpanzee, right? So that's really meaningful in terms of the scientific use of them, in terms of how that will translate to us.
And like Donnie said, it's big business for a lot of universities that get a lot of funding to keep on doing this
And there's also
research.
just kind of same old, like, well, we've done it this way for so long, why would we change it? Yeah.
I'm wondering also with the 14 different centers, how many monkeys are there, primates are there, and then also do they share information with each other, like as far as the findings?
So we actually have, so on your way out, there's a handout, but the handout actually has the information along with a web link, and I gave a web link that is very like not sort of an activist web link, but the actual NIH web link, so you can look at it, but they have a whole...
I'm curious here with all the research that they're doing, like how much how much more research is doing that's kind of like double work, is everything different? And are they collaborating to make big, hypotheses or theory, that figure out theories? I don't know, whatever they're doing, like are they working together? Or they're just, it's like a constant, like, flow of animals primates coming in and being used?
It seems more like the latter.
Think about the psychology experiments in universities. Those are being duplicated all the time. Think about all the Me Too drugs on the market, how many erectile dysfunction drugs, how many antihistamines do we need? So much of this is duplicative. It's just big money.
There's so much more that AI could even take all that research, and then put together, look at all of it, through algorithms and make conclusions, with all the stuff that's already been done, with having to use more primates.
I feel like this is just so crazy to hear because studying psychology now, I was under the impression that in the 50s, after the Maslow's monkeys, taking the monkey away from the mother and providing the comfort monkey, after that point, after that experiment, things changed. And they don't talk about any of this stuff. And when I do my research, it's mostly on the rats, and it's never horrible like this. When we talk about the ethics of it, my teachers would probably say stuff like this would never pass, the board to be able to do these kind of experiments. They would say something like you would have to use monkeys that their brain is already traumatized and experiment on them, which is just crazy to me. But also, I was thinking about the brains and how we're similar or different. The monkeys, if you're testing for things like fear or very primal emotions, the brain is similar in that way, because the brain developed for us differently after that point. The higher cortices of the brain are different than the monkey, but the primal fear. But anyways, this is just I don't know. This is scary. I feel like I'm in an alternate universe right now.
It's funny, I wanted to be a psychologist. I started with Psych 101, and I remember the chapter on the maternal deprivation experiments was so horrifying. I thought it wasn't real. I saw the pictures, and I was like, no, surely they wouldn't do this. But they still do the maternal deprivation experiments, which is where they take the baby away from the mother, and it's very traumatic. But that's done all the time, actually, at research centers across the country. There have been, do you know, there was a male scientist who was doing pretty gruesome ones. It was an offshoot of the maternal deprivation ones, and that was at a university. It was got tons of national media attention, but I can't remember who it
Not
was.
UCLA.
Maybe, I don't know.
There's also the larger question of, even if the scientists aren't sadistic like Dr. Murray was, I mean, is there any justification to experiment on any animals?
But actually, I would love to ask you guys a question. Did you think Margaret Murray was sadistic? Because the experiments you're seeing, like, they're not atypical, like just at a, they're not atypical. And animal research is done all the time, and the use of animals for medical reasons, like the guy that just got the heart transplant from a pig. So you take a pig, you kill the pig, take the pig's heart, put it in a person. This is done all the time. It's completely normalized. So, we saw behind, sometimes, it's like you don't want to see behind like a slaughterhouse, right? You want your hamburger, but you don't want to go to the slaughterhouse. So sort of similarly, like, you don't want to see what's actually happening in the lab, but it does happen all the time. So one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys is she sadistic really? Or is she just part of a system that normalizes experimentation? Like, this is just the way it works. This is big pharma. Is she a bad person? Do we really hate Margaret, or are there good parts to Margaret?
Yeah, she was desensitized to it, and also her personality type. If she's, naturally a scientist, she's going to be more practical minded. But I think she went into I'm just guessing. She probably went into the field with noble intentions and figured she can use her mathematical brain, put it to good use. And I think she was desensitized to it, and maybe as a form of defense mechanism, tried to find jokes in it.
Black humor that surgeons and
it
people
was
like that.
still horrible and dreadful and inexcusable, but because she does, mention about her son, so she knows that it's, that it's not acceptable what she's doing. Hence why she does it late at night and secrecy and.
Yeah, kind of like the idea of compartmentalization. Like how we don't compartmentalize everything, and how she's doing that. Because that's a question. Did you feel like there was a protagonist in the end? Did you feel like one was good or bad, or did you feel like they were both mixes? Like, how did you feel about them? Did you like them? Did you want Kara to kill Margaret? Yeah.
Yes,
he's like,
yes.
Yeah, as soon as they revealed in the video, like from the 80s and 90s, that she's laughing with her colleagues and, kind of mocking the monkeys and making fun of them, I don't like her at all. I think she's sadistic, and she's desensitized by the time it gets to 2023. But we see this villain from the beginning, and we see evidence of it. So I think she's sadistic.
Well, just something. Sorry, what was yours? Oh, it's actually pointing to me. No.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, because you had your hand up before.
Oh,
Yes.
Sorry. I wasn't sure, to be honest, which is protagonist and antagonist are. Because to me, it's the most scariest thing is somebody committed murder to get away. That was a scary part to me. So then, but it was pretty much show that reason why or those things. I was wondering same things with the scientist part. Maybe there was a time she thought, oh, that was terrible, I can't do this, but somehow she had to do or she decided to do. And when she mentioned about sound, I thought maybe the sound has brain damage or something. That I was, I expected to come up. That was the reason she has to do this and to do this to find a cure or whatever. But it wasn't this. So I was wondering why this mention about sound and still it didn't sit.
You feel like you wanted to know more about
it's both sides, if possible, instead of just demonize one side. It is a terrible thing, and I'm animal lover. But it's then what is the alternative? It's maybe in future AI can solve maybe, but it's then experiment on human being, or just not to develop any drug and say, okay, you just suffer and die. That's what's the alternative. I think that was a scientist part, probably.
There actually are human experiments.
Yeah,
happening for
right.
decades, and some of them are dicey too. But yeah.
So then, it's a question is which is better, so that's a very complicated thing if you're really looking for the reality. And then,
So I have a question prompted by this discussion now, and I've had wine as well. Do you feel, from what you've learned from what Jenna said and what this gentleman over here has said, is there information that you've learned that you would want to see incorporated in the movie as part of this discussion about the ethics or something? Would you want that spelled out in a movie? Has any of this stuff prompted questions or thoughts? Yes.
To me, what would make Margaret the most scary is that she's not a demon. She's very normal. And that just could be any
The
person.
banality of evil.
Exactly. You could see this person walking down the street and not know that this human being is part of these experiments. Those to me are the scariest kind of people.
Okay.
Because that's what made Ted Bundy effective. Everybody was, if Ted Bundy looked like a serial killer, he would have killed anybody. But he looked like the average guy. And that's what fooled all of his victims.
It's so funny you said the banality of evil, because so that phrase was coined by Hannah Arendt, right? She is a Jewish intellectual, and she was covering the Nazi war trials. And I forgot his first name, but somebody Eichmann. Adolf Eichmann. He was a bureaucrat, and he was just pushing papers. He didn't actually kill anybody, but he was just pushing papers. And after the trial, but those papers put millions of people into the gas chambers. And Hannah Arendt famously said, oh, he was so boring. He was just like this bureaucrat. He just personified the banality of evil, and that was exactly what you said was what I was hoping to do with Margaret Murray.
And she was also driven by her ambition for success, recognition. That could also lead a person towards evil.
And especially the time frame too, because there were very few women like in neuroscience and stuff like that in the late 80s, early 90s, and so there definitely is, I feel, my dad's in science, I definitely feel like there's sort of and especially when you're dealing with animals, you've got to be kind of macho, you can't be like, oh, I feel so bad, you're like, no, I'm I'm tough, and toughness means we don't cry, we don't show emotion, we don't show too much empathy, let's calm down now, so part of the reason in my mind when she was making fun of them and stuff like that is that it was almost like a defense mechanism, she was trying to show, I'm one of you guys, I'm super tough, haha, look what I can do.
I didn't think she was a sadist, and her humor. I used to cover crime in Rochester, New York, and I had to become comfortable with the medical examiner's office and the police officers who did murder. And they had a sense of humor that was reminded me of her humor. The closer that I wanted to get to them to be sources, the more I had to be willing to crack jokes. I couldn't crack good jokes, but I learned to accept their jokes. So I think there's a region of human nature where I could see people doing that, and I want to call them sadistical. Though I know there are sadistical people in the medical examiner's office, in the police department, who are really into getting pleasure out of the horrors that they were seeing. But I thought the others were, this is what we need to do the job.
A coping mechanism.
Yes.
Yes,
I was just thinking, my dad also was a trauma surgeon for our organization, and I remember actually as a child, at some point when he was in the hospital, and seeing pigs for experiments. lot of lives have to be sacrificed for all of us in this world to live. But I do think that I also, as somebody who works with like in this very challenging field, I think the level of like compartmentalization, the finding humor in ridiculous situations is important. And I also think there's sometimes this very easy idea that there's a clear victim and there's a clear perpetrator. And I think y'all are getting to like there's nuances there. Trauma runs both directions, and most people who perpetuate trauma are also victims of trauma because we all at some level have an aspect of trauma. I mean, when you look at the percentages of really horrific abuse stats and things like that, that's like everybody walking around us. And I think it's something that, as humans, to get through life, we do our best to ignore and deal with. But it's also a reality that, depending on what parts of life you focus on, you kind of have different things here.
I just have one point, right? It might be interesting to see her, like, what her, if you go, like, flashback to when she first did her first, like, when she did her first experiment and monkeys were killed, like, what happened right there? You know, did she first think it was horrible and then change after that? Like, after she became, you know, kind of the first, you know, she broke that, I guess, killing the cherry, whatever, like, what happened, you know, then, and then after that it was more and more, it was less and less. It'd be interesting to know, like, did she care, you know, at first?
Many years ago, I worked at NYU Medical Center, where I was surrounded by research scientists. I saw them every day, and they would come, you know, it was mostly, well, they worked, the area that I was, the department that I was in was malaria research, so they worked mostly with mice, mostly they would be coming in with mice often. And these were regular, everyday people. The banality of it. So from that perspective, as I was listening, I was in a way kind of expecting to hear certain things from Margaret. I was expecting her to say maybe things like, well, this is how you become a scientist. You know, you can't really become a medical doctor in today's world unless you go through this process of animal experimentation and get accustomed and comfortable with it. Because the people coming in every day, you know, with the mice, they were very comfortable. You know, they would be chatting about you know, just everyday things with the trays of the mice in their hands on their way to, you know, they would be checking their mail. Here's the mice, here's the mail. Just it was very everyday. And so I was expecting things like that to come from her. Well, you know, this is the way it is, you know, this is the way we're trained. This is, and I wondered whether Kara might have had some change of heart about her a little bit, if she had come forth with a little bit more softness and, you know, something like, or maybe seeing the light a little bit after I wondered, is there gonna be a transformation there, or is, but I was all for Kara killing her. And I'm glad she got away with it.
Or at least you think she got away with it.
We think, yeah.
Can I ask a question? What did you feel that, so there's a scene with some animal rights activists, and then there's a reference to them by Dan. How do you feel that this script portrayed animal rights activists, if at all? Or were they just kind of a neutral that was there? Were they portrayed well, badly? Any thoughts on that at all?
I mean, they do what activists do. They chant, they hold signs, but I didn't view Kara as an animal activist. I did view her as just avenging her mother's death, and she just got too deep into it, and it just twisted her psyche. So it would have been disturbing if she was an animal rights activist and she then committed murder.
So the activists were peaceful, they were just loud and chanting and trying to make a change through nonviolent ways.
So kind of neutral.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any thoughts on animal rights activists?
Well, not animal rights.
Okay.
I wanted to go back, because as you know, when you're pitching this star into a studio, the question you will inevitably be asked is, what is your connection to the story?
Honestly, it was really just reading that trial, the Hickman trial, and it was just an exploration. I'm very interested, so I started as a psych major. I actually stopped, so this, when I was doing psych, animal experiments were required for psych 2, for cognitive psych, and at that time there was not an opt-out. You could not opt out, so I immediately just opted out. I did an opt-out by dropping the major, because I just, for me personally, I wouldn't do it, but it's very interesting to me, just, and all of us, myself included, absolutely, do this all the time. We compartmentalize and then we justify, like, doing things or not doing things, right? Like, how many times have we seen something bad happening and we're like, I'm really busy and I need to get here, and what could I even do anyways? So, like, I'm just gonna walk on. But we all kind of do these things, and I just wanted to play with the psychology of normal people doing terrible things, and like how that could be. And I kind of almost didn't want to make there be, like, you know, like Margaret's son, for example, make him, because that was actually a suggestion several people have made about having him be have CTE, or have, maybe he was a football player and he, you know, something happened. I kind of just wanted her to just be like, no, I just really want to do this. Like, I just, you know, and I'm getting a lot of money, and that's pretty awesome, and like, it's not really bad. It's like, you know, stepping on a bug. I mean, right? Like, it's okay. There's a lot of monkeys in the Amazon. Like, if I take a couple, what's the problem?
Another targeted question again. So, as you know, this story has 2 significant characters, and if you think about this question from getting a production made, a marketing, someone in the audience going to see the movie, you know, the current iteration feels like it's like a 70-30, 71 character, 30 the other character. Is there any benefit or need from your perspective of filling out this percentage a little bit more on the 30 side for counterpointing or advocating some of the themes that Jen's talking about, or do you think there's the right mixture of percentages between the 2 main characters as currently presented?
Yeah, I think it could be upped a little bit, like the 30% could be moved up a bit, to see the struggle
I'm curious if it is needed, if there's any benefits from like a heightening the tension between the characters, if there's anything from like upping the ante. Like, I mean, obviously if it's the right percentage, it's the right percentage, but that's just a question that I was curious for the people who would be the paying audience to go watch it, if that's anything that influenced you or not.
Actually, I was going to say it's the right mixture, but then I listened to, you know, what she said, and then I thought about it, and no, actually, I do want more of Margaret. But again, going back to the earlier comment, I want us to see that, no, this is not a monster. This is not, you know, this is not a person who is a sadist. This is the person who could be your neighbor next door. And that to me is the scary part, is how normal that person would be.
No.
I actually think it's the right mixture in terms of how much time is spent with each character. I think when it comes to more, I want to see more of the Kara's kind of development as a person. Because there's a lot of flashbacks to like her as a child with the mother and like going to college and whatnot. But I feel like I didn't really get to buy into the character as much. I feel like I wish I bonded more, so that when she commits a murder, I'm actually really conflicted. But because I wasn't bonded to her, I was kind of like, oh, she's very evil. Like, it was kind of very easy good for me. So I wish I had more of that, and also just more character development with the parents. Because because I think it was centered in her, and the flashbacks didn't have as much with like the mother and the
Kara with her parents.
right, like there's more kind of depth in terms of parents' characters, if that makes sense. I wanted to know a little bit more about the mother and like how her story fits into her motivation and whatnot. So I don't know if that was clear.
How did you feel about Margaret when she was arguing with Kara about why she was doing what she was doing? Did you feel like you wanted to hear more from her or less from her in terms of those interactions between the two lead characters? That's a question for everybody.
Okay.
I just happen to be looking at you. You can answer. Anybody have any feedback on those scenes between the two of them? Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to find a little more sympathy with Kara. I wanted to see a little more reasoning behind, she's killing somebody and she's torturing her before she did it, in a way. And she killed her. She didn't just shoot her, kill her right off. So I needed to find a little more sympathy to her because I don't believe in killing anybody.
That's one of the things I was trying to figure out. When you read it on paper, and when you visually can see the flashbacks, it's a little hard for us to figure it out here because you lose a little bit in the flashback stories just naturally from the stage narration. That's where you're getting it. It picks up a little bit more of like how that impacted, and I wonder if there is some ways to like narratively pull that out a little bit with the actual.
How did you guys feel about the brutality? Because the mother's death should have been quite brutal, and did you feel like there needed to be more about the way she died, or much more?
And then the back?
My thought about that was that I found myself wishing that she actually did see her mom's body, because I felt like that might ground some of the behavior in the future.
So like more see the actual. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you can answer that. I'm just trying to figure out if somebody else was waving their hand, so I was going to call them next, but please answer.
Just, do you mean like the actual corpse versus like the autopsy photos later on?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, having that kind of trauma happen as a child.
Or maybe her monkey was used, her pet monkey maybe, I don't know, it's kinda silly. Did she have a pet monkey?
There's no silly comments or questions, it's a suggestion, yeah.
Maybe she had a pet monkey that she felt attached to.
Yeah, actually.
Could it just be a pet?
Yeah, I was actually wondering is who killed that that scientist didn't kill her mother, right? It's like
No, it was the
that's
guy.
So that was I mean that the order or that's a corporation or
Yes.
I think it's more like a truly bad one might be somewhere it never mentioned, and then what she is
Want to know why she's
revenging
on Margaret.
Right.
Okay.
That connection I missed. It's maybe something with on the data and it's her name popped up. It's some like report or something, and then that might be a connection. But it's I couldn't help thinking it, but she didn't kill her mother.
So it wasn't clear to you. Actually, was it clear to people then? So
clear.
the mother's doing conservation work in the Peruvian Amazon. She's trying to protect these areas that house these squirrel and spider monkeys. So then when Dan steals all that data and Kara's going through it, she finds all these letters from Margaret Murray asking for those specific monkeys. And they say, look, we can't give them to you because there's this conservationist, she's so obnoxious, she's causing all these problems. Here, have some baboons. And Margaret Murray says, absolutely not, I don't want your stupid baboons, I want these monkeys. And it's really regrettable that one conservationist is causing all this trouble, so please give me my gosh darn monkeys. And she says, and then the letter Kara reads is that she says, by any means necessary. But you felt that was not clear, that should be more fleshed out.
That was clear. That much I got it. But then it said that one is hiring somebody to
It wasn't a direct enough connection for you to
that was a little jump to me, yeah.
Okay.
Did other people feel that way?
Yeah, sometimes you find something you can touch, you can grab onto, you can react to. like you have the abstract of the corporation, which is hard to react to. You have a person, like a contextual thing that you can put your hands on. So I think there's a lot of naturalness to like focus your negative energy on something you can tangibly attach to, for good or for bad.
I guess I had also.
You then you. Okay. You.
I guess I have sort of something that's just making me feel that Margaret was right in a way, that killing one person isn't gonna change the situation that much. That it has to be more of a systemic change and legal laws, like, saying you can't do experiments on animals anymore or whatever. So in a way, it's like, okay, you killed somebody, but it's not gonna really help.
I liked the character of Michael, the husband, very much. I thought he was very strong. And he made me feel a little bit more for Margaret. But I was thinking, what is he seeing in her? I'm like, what he's seeing something that the rest of us are not seeing. He's really loving this woman. I'm thinking, what is he liking about her so much? She seems like she's not giving him a whole lot, to love. But I thought that was a very interesting dynamics going on in there. And I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more, because it was making me feel almost some sympathy for Margaret. Like, because she has this husband, she has this great, husband who really, cares about her so much.
Okay.
I wanted that fleshed out a little bit more.
Okay.
Maybe. But he was very strong.
Well, Eichmann's wife loved him.
That's true.
For me, I thought the dialogue between Kara and Dr. Murray, where Kara makes it clear, I'm not killing you because of the animals. Then that's when we find out she reveals the connection to her mother. And that's what this is real, at least that's what I took away. That's what this is really about. And for me, that I needed to, because I think that's the separation. If this was just an animal actor, then I would think, wow, you're going to an extreme here. But really, this is about, to Kara, this is the person who was responsible for the death of her mother. And not only did she die, but she died in a very brutal way. So that's why she doesn't just want this person to die, she wants her to suffer.
I have two thoughts. One is, I think a lot of Kara's actions, the fact that they're motivated by her mom. There was one thing that her mom said that I thought was going to be, like, in my mind, foreshadowing something very crucial, but it ended up not being as important, which is the statement where she says, like, every person, like, I'm paraphrasing, but, like, every person has the ability to make an impact, but it's you who chooses what impact you choose to have. And I thought that was foreshadowing in some way the decisions that Kara would be making. But I think at the end, it almost feels like it is the opposite of what that her mom was trying to teach her, that she ends up doing, right? And so kind of related to that, I think whether or not you switch the makeup of how much time is spent on each character ultimately depends on how you want the audience to feel about the fact that Kara murders at the end, right? So for example, I also found the character of Michael super compelling, but I think the more you delve into that, the more human Margaret will feel, right? And so for example, if her son is a certain way, or if she entered this field because she really had these dreams of making a difference in the world, or maybe she's just money hungry and she's doing this for the money, whatever you do will just make her feel more human and will impact the way the audience feels after she's killed. But similarly, I think for Kara, for example, we don't really see very much of how she feels after she's committed the murder. We just see a little bit on TV and she says what's that, right? Feigning innocence or ignorance. But I think it'll feel very differently for the character. One, for example, if if she saw her mom's dead body as a child, but also like, do we see her feel remorse, or maybe she feels empty? Does she feel super content and satisfied? And I think these are all things to like consider and how you want the audience to feel at the end of the day, because I think the way it is right now, there's not like as much character development from Margaret to make us feel truly bad for her, but also feel super satisfied by her ending, right? And so I think depending on where you want it to go, you could kind of like add the different details after to add to that.
It's funny that the quote you picked up, so it's actually paraphrased from a Jane Goodall quote, but it's everything we do or don't do makes a difference, and it's up to us to decide what kind of difference we make. But that was actually intentional. I wanted you to wonder at the end, because it was repeated twice in the script, and I wanted you to wonder at the end, was she actually doing what her mom would have wanted? Was she actually? And in some ways I kind of held back because I didn't want to feed the audience what they should feel about the characters, and it's hard to do it in a reading because obviously we're like in our pages and everything, but I really want people to not know, actually. I want you to come out and not be sure who you like, and not be sure who's good and who's bad, and for that to create a dialogue.
And if that's the case, I think I personally would beef up Margaret's backstory to make it a little bit more relatable. Just because I think the way it's done now, especially the videos and the audio tapes and things, it creates like a very visceral reaction in the person of placing her as kind of evil. But I think no human is like purely evil, at least not from the get-go, and to add those details, like why does Michael love her so much and is willing to go out to do so much for his wife that never spends time with him, and you know, like this person was like a loved and lovable person in some way, and if you want the audience to not understand, I think that's something that could be added.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Are you working on a sequel? A sequel.
Oh.
I mean, there is so much into.
Yeah, well originally, I'd never written anything longer than a short film before, so originally I was thinking of this as a TV series.
Oh, I was
yeah.
about to say that, yes.
Yeah.
That's what was bouncing in my brain.
Anybody else? Yes.
I just like a repeated cycle where Kara's mom was killed by Dr. Murray, and then Kara killed Dr. Murray. And for me, I just inferred that the person following her was Dr. Murray's son. And so I was like, it just keeps going, you know, and I just thought, and I was thinking too, like, is there gonna be a sequel? So yeah, I did enjoy that it was like from beginning to end, it connected that whole aspect of the title with Monsters Among Us. Like it wasn't just a single antagonist.
Oh, I just have to end by saying, as an animal activist, I got a lot of satisfaction from it. I liked seeing her being tortured because I have so.
But she is nonviolent. Don't worry.
So often wanted to do to these people what they do to the animals. I think it, live it, so much like, oh, I wish I could get my hands on that person and do what they do to the animals, to have it done to them. So I got some satisfaction from it.
It was very difficult seeing the pictures.
Yeah.
It was very difficult.
And it's all real.
Yeah.
And we cut it down a lot. Yeah, it was very, I felt very bad for my editors. I actually had to give, the first editor, I think, just got traumatized terribly. The second editor, I gave him a trigger warning beforehand. I was like, this is very disturbing footage, like, be careful, yeah.
But I did feel for Michael, the husband.
Yeah, I kind of intended both Michael and Dan to be foils. Like, that the women would be very difficult to determine. I was hoping, like, good or evil, but that Dan and Michael would be the foils that would make them more human, that make them more palatable.
That worked well, I think.
Anybody else? Thank you all so much for coming and for your wonderful feedback and participation. Oh, yes, you did. I can't use another glass of wine. I didn't have dinner.
I'll go in with you. Thanks for joining us. So the next stream will be November 19th, Unfinished Works, and that'll be in the afternoon too. Info coming soon on the YouTube channel. And if you like what you saw, feel free to like and subscribe, tick the bell, all that usual stuff, and see you next time. Take care.
Right.